Welcome to Secular Soapbox. I am one of the hosts, Apostacie, also known as Stacy, joined with my co-host David McDonald from Deep Drinks. Today we are welcoming Anthony Magnabosco, who you probably know from YouTube, who does amazing street epistemology videos. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. And if you like what we do here at Skeptic Haven, please consider becoming a Patreon. Let's start the show. Wait, it's a patron on Patreon. I always get it mixed up. Okay.
Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you
Nice
so
to
much
be
for
here.
being here, Anthony. It's so great to meet you and get to talk to you. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time now. So,
Wow. I'm
yay.
honored. Thanks a lot. Nice to be here.
It's not every day that you have the messiah of a certain ideology just come into the show, and you really are. You're essentially I would say, like the goat of this type of thing, street epistemology, right?
Messiah disturbs me, being referred to it as that. I'll have to be honest, because like there really should be no leaders or popes or that type of thing. It's sort of our mantra in street epistemology. But yeah, I've been involved with it for almost 11 years now. And I love it. I love to promote it. It's the solution to many of the problems that I think we're facing. And I'm proud to be associated with it. So thanks. I appreciate the kind words. The ghost of that's beautiful.
So a lot of people, when I was coming out of Christianity or religion, I had no idea what street epistemology was. I wasn't even really that familiar with even the word epistemology. Maybe I heard it in church, but they're not going to stop and give like an explanation of what that word means. Could you give us sort of a quick rundown on what that is for people who might not be familiar with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And don't feel bad, because a lot of people, even in atheist circles, this is a new term. This is a new term to a lot of people. The word epistemology is an academic term. It refers to the study of knowledge or the theory of knowledge. And then street epistemology is an offshoot of that. It's sort of we have a formal definition now that we've been developing in coordination with the course, which is a way of helping people critically reflect on the quality of their reasoning through civil conversation or civil interaction, if you want to make it more broad. And so we're not essentially exploring what you know. We're exploring how you determine that you think you know it.
Right.
And it's a less academic approach to interacting with people about their deeply held beliefs. It's definitely not academic. Like it's really kind of gritty and grassroots.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's kind of been growing over the years. I've been trying to push it as much as possible because it's fundamentally changed the way that I interact with people, especially about religious topics. I was arguing with people, and like you were just talking about, leaving religion. When I sort of came to grips with my atheism, I was arguing with people and debating. Right. And that just was such the wrong approach with people, especially my family and friends.
Yeah.
So I was really pleased to learn about street epistemology and then see that it was quite effective in talking to people about that topic, plus like lots of other topics as well.
Right. Did you come out of like fundamental Christianity, or what was your background with religion?
I don't know it. Well, it's Catholicism. So some people might say, well, that was really hardcore. And other people will say that's nothing. Like talking to Jehovah's Witnesses.
It's one or the other. Yeah. You never know.
But I mean, it was pretty fundamental to my upbringing. Like I was, I went to a Catholic grade school. At second grade, I was baptized in the church, second grade, communion, 8th grade confirmation. Although by that time I was starting to ask questions. And I even told my parents, like, they say that you shouldn't go through confirmation if you don't believe this. And I don't really believe it. So my parents were like, but you have to go through it. So they kind of pushed that. But my whole culture, my family, friends, everyone in my neighborhood were pretty much Catholic. So I was surrounded by that. But I just always kind of doubted at a young age.
Hmm. And for you coming out, was it someone who maybe practiced like a street epistemology or asking those questions in a really, conversational way that got you
No,
thinking, or no?
I
Wow.
wish I had someone like that. There was
That's what,
nobody in my, I mean, I had an uncle, like a great uncle that was supposedly didn't believe, but he would donate his time to the church. And,
mhm,
people kind of, but he wasn't even that close in my life where he was even a role model. But that was probably the closest I had. Like there was some
right,
vague relative that maybe didn't believe, but he was like
right.
the black sheep of the family or something. But no, for me, there was nobody in my life asking those types of questions. I mean, I was surrounded by other people who were also religious, but from different religions. Like the
Mhm.
Lutheran church was right down the street, or this other church, or you might see the LDS commercial come on the TV. There were some
Okay.
rare instances where you get exposed to other types of religions, but as far as
Mhm.
non-believers, I was not exposed to any non-believers at all. No,
Wow.
no, and not just non-believers, but people that would even ask those types of questions. It just wasn't. It was frowned upon. In fact, in second grade, I remember asking my mom and dad if God was made up like Santa, and they were just livid, like horrified. And the next Sunday after Mass, they sat me down with a priest and a nun to tell me how true it was. And they spent, I don't 15 minutes, 30 minutes with me making, all these justifications.
Oh my
And I was
God.
young.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't second grade. I don't know. Maybe it was fourth or fifth grade now that I think
Still.
about it. But like at the end of it, they asked me if I believed, and I said yes, even though I didn't. But it was obvious that I
Mm.
needed to. So I just
Yeah.
always didn't believe it from a
Yeah.
very young age.
Hmm. That's so
Was
interesting.
your story different? You believed it for a
Yeah.
long time, both of you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have died for my religion, like
Same.
when I was 20 something. I spoke in tongues. I was all in. I was a charismatic youth pastor, and I really believed. I remember looking at some of my friends having these like spiritual experiences, and I remember saying to myself, I can never deny this. I can never deny these experiences that I'm having and seeing.
Yeah.
And I still don't deny them, but I just don't think that they're I just don't think that they're from God, or like I don't think that these were anything outside
Sorry.
of natural.
Are you familiar with Jesus Unfollower?
Yes, I follow them
Yes.
on TikTok. I love your TikToks, by the
I
way.
know.
You're awesome.
Hello, Kevin.
Yeah, you took a little hiatus, I noticed, but I think you're back. At least,
He's back. Yeah.
yeah. I love
Yeah.
your stuff. You're awesome.
I know. He's the best.
Yeah, that's the thing. When I was out
Yeah.
like practicing street epistemology in front of the Alamo, and people would ask me, "Well, were you a believer?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I was. I was a Catholic." And those hardcore street preachers were like, "Well, that
Yeah.
wasn't you weren't really a true Christian."
Yeah.
So I started realizing, oh, there's a hierarchy of believing
Definitely.
this stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't even really recognize it until I was probably in my 30s.
Oh, for
Well,
sure.
I used to think that we used to think that Catholics were like following a religion, and
Yes.
Christians had a relationship. with Jesus. Yeah, and so we're like, well, you're not true Christians because true Christianity is having a relationship with Jesus, and Catholicism
kinda
is just
see
like
that.
the religion part.
I can
Yeah.
I can kind of see that because there's so much pomp and circumstance with the Catholic side of things.
Yeah. And there's
There's
like
these
a lot of,
rituals.
and I felt like Catholics had a lot of idolatry worship.
Wow.
Because
Oh
of it.
yeah.
And they prayed to Mary, and they prayed to the saints, and I was like, no, you're supposed to just pray to Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit, and
Mm.
like
Now
the,
it's interesting in the Midwest. Yes, that was the case, but it wasn't as strong as here in the Southwest. Like I live in San Antonio, Texas now, and I've noticed the Catholics spend more time praying to the Virgin Mary, and they've elevated Mary higher than they would, or at least than I noticed in the Midwest, where
okay.
there wasn't that kind of idolatry of saints and stuff as much as it is here in the Southwest of the United States.
Right.
There's some variability there.
Huh.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yesterday, this has nothing to do with anything other than it's a funny thing that happened. Is I'm a server, and a priest came into my restaurant yesterday, completely dressed in his full-on garb, and it was his birthday, and he had 5 parishioners taking him out to lunch. and I jokingly said, "Do you want a wine menu?" And he's like, "Yes, actually I do." And he ordered a gin martini like right off the bat at 11 in the morning. And so I was like,
Nice.
"Oh, okay, I'll make you a gin martini." And then he had a beer after that, and I was like, "Oh wow, okay, this is
Hey.
interesting." Yeah, but there was a lady at the table, and she kept. I think she was new to the faith. Like they were all like quite like older, probably like 60 plus, and she kept asking a bunch of questions, and I was only picking up bits and pieces of their conversation. But one of the things she said was, "Oh, well, that's really good. It's important that everyone thinks the same." And I was just like, "Oh my goodness." So
Yeah.
um, it brought me right back to just being a Christian and like, yeah, I would have thought that is good. Everyone should think the same, about all these
Mm.
doctrines and stuff. And it was just crazy. And I kept thinking, oh, if they had any idea who was serving them right now, and they left just loving me and thanking me for my wonderful service and singing my praises. But because I didn't treat them any different, but it was just unreal to me that one comment about just, oh, it's so important how everyone thinks the same. And
It's funny how you hear these
yeah,
comments.
yeah.
I'm trying to think of some recent examples, but it's very often I'll hear religious people talk and they say things. And it's like, do you even just realize what you've just said? It doesn't.
Mhm.
That's a problem. What you've just said.
Yeah,
There's faultiness with that reasoning.
yeah,
But you're saying it in such a loving way, and it's virtuous to when they say it in that way.
yeah.
And that's like I feel sad.
I
It's
know.
kind of saddening when you're on the
Yeah,
outside looking in at that type of reasoning. It dawns on you how problematic it is and how locked in people can be.
for sure.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I actually, sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've told this story a bunch of times on Deep Drinks, but I dabbled a little bit in street epistemology, but on Omegle when I was just starting my channel. And one of the techniques I learned from, I think it was your videos or Reed, Nice Wonder. I can't remember, but I used them in a real world example where I had a street preacher like come up and kind of interrupt me when I was walking, and then continued to preach to me, and then I said, "I'm not comfortable. I'd like to go." And then they just ignored me, just kept going. They must have felt God called them to talk to me or something. And so I actually sat there and listened to them, and then I used, I think, the best question that you can ask in a situation like that. They told me their testimony, and they were telling me all these things about this happened and this happened and this happened, and God saved me from this and this and this and this. And I was like, and I listened. And I said, "Do you mind if I ask a question?" They said, "Yeah, of course." And I said, "So that's all great evidence for God, right?" And they're like, yeah. And I said, "So I'm not saying this is the case, but let's say someone from another religion came up to this conversation and they asked that same question, and they had a similar experience, and they attributed it to their God, Allah, Buddha, Krishna, someone else. Would that be evidence for their religion?" And the switch that happened in this person's brain, this lady's brain, was just it. You could see the cognitive dissonance that was just like going on up there, because she was presenting all this evidence to me that was meant to make me come along to a revival meeting. And then when it came to that, she got really defensive and was like, "Buddha's done nothing for nobody." And I just kept calmly asking the question. I'm like, well, if it's not evidence for your religion, why is it evidence? If it's not evidence for someone else's religion, why is it evidence for your religion? And I think that question, which I've heard a lot of been used a lot of the time in street epistemology, is like such a good question to ask when someone presents you with religious claims specifically. What do you think about that?
I think it's a wonderful question, and you're right. It is a common question that we ask in a street epistemology type of engagement. It's called an outsider test, and it was originated by John Loftus, who would make for a great guest, by the way. He's a prolific author, and he coined. Well, I don't think he was the original person, but he definitely popularized this idea of the outsider test. This ability to consider the reasoning that you're using to arrive at your conclusion, and then pretend that somebody else has used that same reasoning to arrive at a completely different conclusion that you think is mistaken. And that third-party perspective is so fantastic in helping people get some objectivity to their reasoning and contemplate it. And I would guess that they probably considered your question more because of the way that you conducted yourself prior to asking it. Like you could have been arguing with them and asked that same question, and it may not have landed with them. But since you were seemingly respectful and you listened to them and you heard them out, and then you sort of waited for your moment, and you even asked for permission to ask the question, which is awesome
I think that's
too, by the way.
important.
That's
Yeah,
so
you've got to
important.
ask.
So like what we're finding is that these questions are very powerful, but you can enhance them by the way that you carry yourself and the mindset that you have when you're interacting with somebody. When somebody is feeling defensive and reactive, they're going to be much more resistant to the types of questions that will generate the kind of critical reflection that we're looking for in street epistemology. But if you can help people feel psychologically safe, and feel listened to, and that you are truly respecting them and you care about them, and ideally you're not faking it, that will come through and they'll consider your questions even more. So those two things seem to go hand in hand if you want to make an impact with those types of questions. I think it's awesome that you did that.
Whenever I'm watching like your videos, I always put myself back into like my Christian self and wonder, and also wish I had come across someone like you who would ask these types of questions and think, okay, how would I have responded to that? And I really think I probably would have considered a lot of what you ask, and it probably would have planted a ton of seeds. And I think the way that you do ask these questions is such a gentle approach, and you're not trying to change people's minds. You're just really asking them like, okay, what do you believe and why? And I think I probably would have walked away and been like, oh my gosh, I would have thought about it for like the rest of the day. And like, I know you do give your card sometimes to people. Do you ever get a lot of follow-up after doing that?
Some. I've received some follow-up. There were years where I didn't even give people my contact information.
Oh,
I would just
okay.
do the interview and then shake their
Yeah.
hand and then walk away. But then it dawned, or maybe people left comments like, you should really give them your card. So I started doing
Yeah.
that. And then maybe 5% of the time somebody would reach out and say, can I get the link to the video? Because I would record them with my camera.
Yeah.
Or they would want me to meet with their priest or their parents, or
Okay.
or where can I learn what you're doing? That type of stuff. Like it was usually pretty positive. I can't remember. Maybe one or two times somebody was upset from the conversation at the end of it. But even the fact that they wrote me led me to think that it stuck with them. So I think that these questions do stay with people, especially
absolutely.
if you carry it out in a fair, compassionate way. It will probably stay with them more.
Yeah, because I find like what do you say? You usually say like 5 minutes or so that you ask,
Yeah.
and like they're not usually like, okay, your time is up. I gotta go now. Like for most time, they're just kind of like, oh, I'm enjoying this conversation. Like they tend to last a lot longer. So yeah.
It's also kind of hard. Excuse me. Sorry.
That's
I
okay.
should have muted. It's also kind of hard to do street epistemology in a short amount of time. Like I was given that advice, and in hindsight, I would say it's poor advice. You shouldn't be rushing these conversations because they kind of need to build and establish rapport and trust and go where they're taking you, as opposed to driving them to a conclusion to help them realize that their reasoning is faulty, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And there was this drive, especially on YouTube, when you're trying to get short punchy clips, where there's an incentive to be kind of quick and to the point.
Right.
But it wasn't probably setting the best example for people who wanted to mimic it in their lives.
Right.
But the timer is kind of helpful for getting people to stop. But you're right. Like when people, they start revealing their claims, their beliefs, they start revealing their reasons, and then the methods for verifying those reasons, they're usually locked in. They're not, including myself, all of us, we're not usually in a mindset where we're deeply contemplating how we concluded that our beliefs are true. We don't do that much.
No.
It usually takes an event like, So you get a job offer in a different city. Like there's these big monumental events that tend to result in that type of reflection, but we don't tend to normally do it in a day-to-day.
Yeah.
And once people are in those situations, they tend to really get into it and like it.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about SE, street epistemology, is that people like it, and it seems to be effective in helping people reflect on their reasoning.
Yeah.
And it's not a contentious debate or an argument where you feel like crap afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're the questioner or the recipient of the questions.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like, at least watching it, it doesn't look like an attack, and I imagine it doesn't feel like an attack, as opposed to a debate.
Do you ever find that you kind of in your, I guess, personal life, do you find that sometimes when you're engaging with someone and you're in a disagreement, that you'll use street epistemology techniques or conversational techniques to, I guess, arrive at the conclusion of the problem or the issue? But do you find that sometimes your emotions take over and you slip into argumentative mode, or have you just moved past? Because for me, my wife, we have a lot of family members I disagree with, and my wife can tell when I've switched from street epistemology mode into argumentative mode, and she said, "You were doing good there, and then you said this, and that was argumentative, and you should have just stayed in." But I get I'll get too emotional about something, and I'll make a snidey comment or something like that. Do you find that you can still slip back into, I guess, the old way of communicating, or do you ever just not use street epistemology techniques when you're like arguing, I guess, about like a restaurant to go to or something? Not that important, not that trivial, but
I would be lying if I said that I was always doing SE all the time, because it takes discipline to do it. But what I tend to recognize is that I'm getting perturbed about the conversation, or I feel that they're wrong and I need to show that they're right. And then I might make a misstep, like, I don't know, give them a fact to show that they're wrong, or get upset. But it's usually pretty brief if it even happens at all. My default primarily is to use SE. And I mean, just recently, a couple weeks ago, I was helping with a loved one who was in his last days, and there were a lot of people coming in to help out because it was a at-home hospice type of situation, and lots of people who were coming in had all this advice about, and they were a little bit some of them were a little bit distrustful of the medical industry. So I found myself in a really emotional situation to begin with, like taking a deep breath, repeating back what I think that they said, and then asking them some questions that I think helped them feel heard and gave them a little bit of pause before they made recommendations that were against what the medical industry was suggesting in the moment. And that would never have happened if I wasn't familiar with SE or have been practicing it for this amount of time. When you find yourself in an emotional situation, it's so hard to take yourself out of it and be objective and compassionate and questioning. But you can do it. It just takes a lot of time to do it, to get there, I think. Probably, and I think that there are some people maybe who will never get there, where their default is just to just fly off the handle, and you just kind of have to let those people go. But I'm a little bit more optimistic. I think the more that you practice it, or at least if you watch examples and you see the outcome of this other approach, maybe it'll start shifting people towards that approach as opposed to a more reactive type of engagement.
Right. So how would you how did you start practicing it? Did you decide one day just to go out and start asking random strangers, or did you practice with people in your family, your friends? Because how do you get
I didn't practice
good
it
at
with I practiced it literally by going out on the street with my camera and just like turning on my camera and flagging people down. And for a good year, I was arguing with people and making claims myself and showing people, well, you say, and most of it was religious in nature, because that the introduction to SE was, this is how you talk to religious people.
Okay.
So I went out to talk to religious people, and it took a very long time to shift from counter apologetics that you tend to see on these call-in shows, which are really useful for people observing. Like you can see the bad arguments being made, you can see the challenges to those arguments, and as you're passively watching, they're phenomenal for that, because you could be contemplating it and you're not in the hot seat.
Right.
So I was using that approach with people face to face, not only in my family circles and friend circles, but out on the street. Even as I was trying to do street epistemology, I was still slipping into those ways.
Okay.
Like I remember this one street preacher, he was really stuck on evolution, how evolution wasn't true. And I would buy books on evolution, and I bought like a microscope because he was talking about how you couldn't zoom in, to see viruses or that type of thing. I was like making an effort to give him stuff to convince him, and even it just like, but then you start to realize, oh, the people that I'm speaking with are confident in their conclusions. They are the ones who have reason to their conclusion, and they have the information. So I need to ask questions about how they became convinced. And once you make that switch in your mind, like I'm going to ask them questions to help them reflect on their reasoning. It's a total game changer, and it takes the pressure off of you because now you don't have to study up on the Quran or whatever if you're going to talk to a whole bunch of Muslims.
That's true.
Yeah,
you don't have to be an expert in like
they're the expert.
all the right. Okay, you just
they're
know
the supposed expert. Now you might meet an epistemically humble person who says, I'm a Christian, I'm not an expert in it, but I believe it, and I'm about 80% sure that it's true. You get a lot of humble people like that, but most people are dogmatically certain.
Oh, I was one of those. I was
you?
Definitely one of those. Oh, for sure. Like the fact that I do these shows now and I'm on this side, I still am like, what is my life? Yeah.
Do you ever find that someone is an expert? Like you run into someone and like maybe you're not like fully convinced on like climate change or I don't know, something, and then someone comes along and they convince you and you walk away going, okay, well, I'm going to look into that and maybe I'm going to change my mind and maybe Krishna is real, or maybe I don't know. Is there anything that you've actually changed your mind on because someone actually has come with some good answers?
There have been a few times that I've changed my mind, and I don't see it as binary. I see it as a gradient. So like I might have been 40% convinced that it's a good idea to carry a gun on your hip. And now maybe I'm more like an 80 because I've interacted with experts who were open carry proponents, and they made some arguments were really poor and some were okay. But it was enough to get me thinking about it independently. So even though they were experts themselves, I probably didn't change my mind in the moment, but it got me reflecting on my own reasoning, and I found myself shifting, which is exactly what I suspect happens when I ask my questions of people.
Right.
It's like SE is a two-way street. Like you can use it to challenge people about their reasoning and help them explore the quality of that reasoning. But what ends up happening is that you turn it in on yourself. Right. You realize, oh, I've always thought that this is true. I always thought I should put the dryer sheets in with the clothes. And now I saw this thing on TikTok where you shouldn't be doing that. And you start wondering about your own beliefs, and you find yourself shifting on these things.
Yeah.
I asked close friends of mine who are flat earthers. I said, and I was like, if the earth is flat, I want to know about it. So like, tell me why the earth is flat. And they had the best answer. They just said, I can't remember. But it is great.
Wow, that's interesting because I found a lot of flat earthers, at least the ones that are active online, they tend to be a little bit more science minded, and they understand the importance of defeasibility and to show that your test is incorrect and these types of things, and the importance of evidence. Not generally though. My first question to a flat earther would be something like, is your belief that the earth is flat in any way tied to your religious views?
Okay.
Because more than likely, in fact, I've been looking for this clip. I remember seeing a clip at the start of a flat Earth convention, and they were kicking it off. I think it was the keynote, and the guy said something like, "And we have a diverse audience here. We even have people in the audience that don't even believe in God and think the Earth is flat." And I was thinking, "Wow, that's interesting." They're noticing that there's even a schism, but I would say most people have these other beliefs, including their political ones, because of the religious underpinnings.
Right.
And that's why I love using street epistemology personally to explore religious beliefs, because once people realize, oh, maybe I shouldn't be so confident that my God is real, it has implications for the things that they want to promote in the culture, what they want to have taught in schools, who they decide to vote for, and all these policy decisions are very intricately linked to those religious views.
Right. One of the things you said earlier about it, sometimes it takes a big event in order to make you reflect on what you believe. Um, there was a huge event that we might have heard about in the last couple of years. I don't know if you remember, but this thing called COVID happened, and there was
Yep.
a lot of people, including myself. That's when a lot of people left the church, was during COVID, because either they were away from the church and they were just thinking, oh, well, my life is like still doing great, or, maybe I don't need this. So I was one of those people that actually left Christianity during COVID. And
Really?
yeah. And at the beginning of COVID, I was worried about people not wanting to come back to church, them getting really comfortable staying at home and like, oh, what is this going to do? How are people's faiths going to survive? But what made me start to really think about my beliefs wasn't about like not wanting to return to church. It was realizing that what people were believing about conspiracy theories relating to COVID and everything, a lot of the people who were believing those conspiracy theories were religious people. And I started to think, well, if they're believing a lot of these conspiracy theories, what are they like not really thinking about their own religious beliefs? And am I one of those people who might not have really examined my own beliefs well enough? And so that's when I really kind of started asking myself a lot of these really hard questions and digging into my own, beliefs I've had since I was a baby, a child, a toddler. And that's how I became an atheist. And I was shocked because it was not on my radar in any way, shape, or form. But it did take a huge event, and I never would have saw that coming. So, yeah, that was kind of how that all started for me. And I just wanted to share that because I'm wondering if you might have seen kind of any kind of similar thing when you've been out talking to people in relation, like.
Well, it's funny. I
Or...
started curtailing my street interviews right around COVID.
Oh, okay.
But when COVID was happening, I was thinking, is this going to be another one of those events like 9/11? 9/11 was very influential for myself personally, and like recognizing I was an atheist. And
right.
You ask some of the four horsemen, right? Hitchens, Harris, Dennett, Dawkins. 9/11 was a big thing. It was a big thing it was an event. And I remember when COVID happened, and that's when TikTok was sort of taking off too.
Yes.
I was on TikTok 2 or 3 hours a day, and I was thinking, is this going to be a big event for religious people like 9/11 was? And it's so fascinating that was your situation, because I was watching the videos. I was watching people like Greg Locke just lose his shit trying to get people. Like he bought a tent just to get people to keep coming back to church. Yeah. And I think these religious leaders realized how impactful COVID could be. Like once you stop going and you break that routine, that gives you perspective. You take 2 or 3 weeks off from that. In fact, it reminds me of Stephen Hassan. He's like the famous. He was with the Moonies. Bite model.
Yeah,
that if you're in a cult.
Yeah.
I think he was in a car accident and he had some time to reflect. And it's that type of reflection that we're aiming for in a conversation where we're doing SE without like being in a car accident or having to go through a pandemic, right? It's like in the moment, can you objectively think about it, how you're reasoning to this thing?
Yeah.
In another life, I was a game developer, and one of the things that you learn in video game development is you don't want someone playing all of your game at once. You want them playing a small amount every day to get them like hooked. So that's why like Candy Crush and those mobile games, they only let you play a certain amount of time each day. They make it really hard to continue to play. And the reason they do that is because they want to form a habit of like every day when you sit down after work, you play it for like 20 minutes because that's that's how they get the most amount of money from you. And I can so see how game theory applies to every other area of our lives, especially like something like going to church. if going to church means that beforehand you grab a coffee, you spend some time in a religious ritual that makes you feel good, you learn some things, and then you have some time socializing with friends afterwards. That whole
Fellowship. It's not socializing.
Fellowship. When that whole thing disappears and you're only left with, and like now you've filled those needs in your life, those slots in your life with other, I guess, rituals or things that you do. Routines. This is a better word than rituals. Then all of a sudden it becomes harder to justify going back to church. Even though logically you could say, well, I should be going to church. You might just think, but I just don't feel like I need to go to church. Like that routine isn't there anymore.
I think it was a double whammy, like Stacy was saying, how you would observe people having conspiratorial-minded thinking, and then you were wondering if that's the type of thinking that they were using to stay in the church. And I remember watching on TikTok videos of people like blatantly disregarding the consensus with regards to the dangers of this disease and going anyways and saying that I'm protected by the blood of Jesus and this type of thing. And I remember thinking they're really showcasing the problem with magical thinking. And if there are people watching this, it's going to really open up a lot of people's eyes. And it's so neat to meet somebody who was on the recipient of that. That's cool, Stacy.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
I mean, cool. Like,
yeah.
I'm sure it was difficult. You know,
it was very freeing. I was
freeing.
elated. Yeah, I was really excited once I realized.
Did you get angry?
I got really happy actually, and then I got kind of like my angry, sad phase about a year and a half later. I felt like, oh my gosh, I feel so ripped off in so many areas of life, but that happened after. But for the first little bit, I was just so happy to be free. And
wow,
yeah,
that's not a common. I don't typically hear happiness.
Oh, I woke up with butterflies in my stomach for the first 2 months, and the first thought in my head was, I'm no longer a Christian. And I was just so excited to just see like life in this new way and learn so many things that I was just like devouring books like crazy. Like I would go to the library, my stack of books was like huge, and I was reading like Hitchens and Dawkins and Harris and all, and then that's how I discovered Seth Andrews. I was reading his deconversion because I was like, has anyone else gone through this? Like, is it just me? No, obviously not. So it was just so exciting. And then I actually checked out the book, A Guide to Creating Atheists. Is that? Yeah, and
close.
That's kind of what is it called exactly?
A manual for creating
creating atheists. There we go.
That was the book that I read that got me started on this whole thing.
Exactly. So I checked that book out because I was like, well, I'm already an atheist, but let me see what this book has to say, because I just wanted to read everything. So that is sort of like that's about like the approach to street epistemology. Am I correct on that?
Well, yeah, that was the book that introduced the concept of asking questions and getting down to the foundation of people's reasoning. And because it was centered on religion, faith was presented as the epistemology or the method that people were using to be sure that their beliefs were true. And then, that was the book that and then incentivized me to like go out and record conversations and join Facebook groups and post my videos and get feedback and all that stuff.
Wow. That's so cool. Go ahead, David.
I was gonna I had like a million I've lost my
It's okay.
question.
There's a couple questions that I'm just gonna put on the screen if that's okay. We have Wes has been asking some. So he wanted to know, have you read How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and do the principles go well with street epistemology? If you've read that book.
I don't remember if I've read it. It's possible that I may have read it in high school. Being at the library, I probably pulled it off. I may have pulled it off the shelf and skimmed it, but I didn't read it, nor do I think I remembered much of it.
Okay.
because I think it was in one ear and out the other because I wasn't using anything. If it is close to street epistemology,
Okay.
I'm
I
not
think
sure.
it is.
So no, I don't think I've read it or remember it.
I've definitely heard of it. I think
I've heard
It's
of
a
it
good
too.
book.
Yeah.
yeah. Also, other than, I mean, I think this question, where can we go to learn street epistemology? Are there any classes or something for this? I don't know about any classes, and obviously you can be the one place to learn it, but maybe you can point us in
Yeah,
any other directions.
I have a little cheat code for putting in the URL, but it's just go to navigatingbeliefs.com.
Okay.
And myself and a wonderful team of people for the last 4 years now, we've been working on a course. We've just released the first phase of it, the first half, and we expect to get the second half done before the end of this year. But you can go through and get your certificate for the first part of it. It's called Navigating Beliefs.
Okay.
And go to that website, and it's free. You can go through it at your own pace. You can learn all about what street epistemology is, why you would want to learn it, how to actually do it, the steps of it, because we've kind of boiled it down into these simple steps, and other things like the ethics that are worth considering before you go out and talk with people, whether it's on the street or more normally, over coffee with a friend or that type of thing, or on a car trip. Oh,
Right.
thank you, Wes.
Oh, I
There's
was
the
just
link
going to
right
put
there.
it in.
Thank you. And then we also talk about the mindset that you should have. What's the optimal mindset before you would even want to question people about those beliefs? And then we start getting into actually how to do it. How do you build rapport? And now the second half of it will cover identifying the claim, identifying reasons, getting into the methodology, and then ending the conversation, I think, is one of them. And then we have another module where we're talking about the activism side of SE, because you can use SE to challenge people specifically about things that you think are harmful. Like if you're a vegan and you think eating meat is harmful, you can learn SE tools and engage with people who are eating meat and help them explore their reasoning behind it. So you actually can use it to help people reflect on their beliefs to the point where they might reconsider their position and change their mind. It's not necessarily the should goals. The should goals we've identified as understanding. SE is great for understanding how another person is thinking about things and helping them understand. And the second should goal is critical reflection, helping people take that moment, like if there's a big event in their life, but during a conversation, taking that moment to critically reflect on how they're reasoning about things. Those are really the two primary goals of SE, but you can have these additional goals. So yeah, the course is available now. In fact, we're in the process of translating it into 5 different languages.
Oh, wow.
So it'll soon be available in Dutch, Russian, German, French, and Spanish. And it is amazing. It's the resource that I wish that I had when I started going out to do SE, but we didn't have any resources because we didn't know what the heck it was that we were doing. Like, it's kind of good that we waited 10 years or at least 8 years before we started putting it together and describing what it is we're doing, because we're still figuring it out ourselves. And you could argue that we're still trying to figure it out too. I think it's a continuous process.
Like you're always learning and seeing.
We're always learning. We're learning so many things.
For sure.
We've learned the importance of nonviolent communication, this whole separate body of interaction with human beings where you explore people's feelings and needs. These feelings and needs are so important when it comes to belief formation and belief maintenance. And it was just something I never really considered it. It's like, why do you think that this is true? And what kind of evidence do you have to support it? But there's this whole side effort of recognizing the psychosocial motivations that are behind people's beliefs. I'm kind of getting off track.
No.
It's an amazing course. It's really fantastic.
The website,
really
the website
proud.
looks amazing too. And how do you
Does
respond
it?
to people?
We're in the process of updating that. So.
Oh, really? I think it looks pretty good.
Are you in the course? Yeah, the course is amazing. The course is freaking nice, and there's video examples in there. So if you want to learn about interrupting and how you shouldn't interrupt, we'll probably have a good video example of that. We're in the process of updating this website.
Is there I like your branding and your colors and things like that. Is there when I was doing street epistemology, I had someone make a video about me and post it on their channel and try to expose, I guess, what I was doing. And they were doing this for a lot of the members of the street epistemology community, but they were saying that they were saying that it was just atheism in disguise. It was atheism activism, and I didn't think it was. How do you respond to someone who just says this is just atheism? You're just trying to spread "quote unquote" atheism or atheist beliefs.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. All right, so street epistemology is really effective in helping people reflect on their reasoning. And if they have poor reasoning, it's really good at helping them discover that. And there are certain beliefs that have poor reasoning behind them. And one of them happens to be religious beliefs, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it's going to just slice right through that stuff. But it's not a fault of SE. Now, because SE is useful for that, I could see people gravitating to those tools and using it with all sorts of theists to help them realize that they can't justify their God beliefs and bring them to atheism. And it was largely my motivation when I first started out going to talk to the street preachers and people because of the book that introduced the concepts to me. So you can use it for that. You absolutely can. And some might argue that you should. Like it might be a good thing for humanity if you can help people realize that they don't have good backing for their deeply held beliefs so that they can put less confidence in those and then stop acting out in the world because they have that reasoning. That might actually be a net benefit. So it's a little nuanced because yes, you can use it for that purpose and it's very effective for that purpose, but it's not its sole purpose. You can use it to explore all different types of beliefs. We covered some of them, like COVID denialism, flat earth, right? You name it. I've even used SE, by the way, with people who say, I'm 100% certain that there's no God. And I've helped them reflect on that. Yeah. And I've helped them reflect on that certainty and they moved off of their confidence. So it's just an all around good purpose tool for helping people think about the quality of their reasoning and then aligning their confidence to their own recognition of that quality of reasoning and moving people off of certainty, which is a problem that we tend to see today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think there is good reasoning to believe in a God? Any good reasoning to believe in a God?
Some people, I think, need it. Like, I think that there are some people who needed to get through the difficult moments of their life.
Yeah.
And they have an experience or they were raised with it and it's good enough for them and it meets their psychosocial needs. And that's good enough reasoning for them. Now, I would look at that and say, well, that's terrible reasoning. Don't you value the truth? Like, can't you still find ways to get through difficulties without needing to believe something that's not true? Yeah. But that's not my call to make. That's theirs.
I kind of was in a situation like that sort of recently where I got reacquainted with someone that I invited to church a few years ago. And I was like, oh, I wish I didn't do that. But she told me that at that time, it really helped her and her family because her husband was like addicted to drugs. And that has been the only thing that has kept him off of drugs is going to church. And so I was like, well, if that is what's working, like I wouldn't try and like persuade him to stop going. Like if that has been the only thing, okay. And she's like, I'm not raising my kids with this purity culture crap. I'm not enforcing like the LGBTQ dogma, like anti that. She's like, I'm not even sending them to Sunday school. She's like, but the church part, and he loves Jesus, that's helping him. And our family is doing really well. And he's no longer on drugs. And he's just like, I love Jesus. I'm like, okay. So I think in that kind of circumstance, it's like, I wouldn't be like, I don't think I could go in and start saying, no, you shouldn't believe that. You shouldn't stop doing what you're doing. That's working. And your family is, thriving now. And because if the opposite is him going back on drugs and their family falls apart, it's like, well,
right.
And then I walk away and I'm not affected, but then their life is in shambles, So that's kind of how I understand what you mean. Like some people do need it.
Some
So
people do need it. And it's not to say that they always need it. Like they just
exactly
happen to need it now.
at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
And a good question could be if if they're open to it, would be, how do you think people who don't believe in Jesus are managing to deal with this difficulty?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then don't tell them how people are doing it. Ask them how they think other people will do it. And that might actually help them start thinking about other things that they would entertain besides the supporting beliefs. But you have to be careful because there's, it's
No.
delicate.
I just was, yeah.
Well, what do you guys think about not challenging people's faith, unless they're wanting their faith to be challenged? So for me, I kind of set this this guideline in my life that if someone isn't coming to me to, I guess, ask questions or in that headspace to, I guess, evaluate their beliefs, I don't directly start challenging their beliefs. What do you guys think about that? Do you subscribe to that? Or do you think we should challenge?
Personally, I'm kind of
beliefs?
mixed because they may just never even consider that they could do it if you didn't ask them or challenge them. Like, I sort of think consent is, well, I think consent is really important, and you should ask, do you mind if I ask you some questions to explore your reasoning behind this thing, as opposed to doing it without their permission or sneaking stuff in, that type of thing.
Right.
But it's delicate. Like now I'm thinking about the situation with my family member passing away. I didn't ask for their permission, but they were foisting stuff into the conversation. And I felt, well, since they're doing it, I'm going to respond and I'm going to ask my questions, and I'm not going to ask for consent. But if I was going to really deeply challenge some of their reasoning behind it, I think I would ask for their consent. So there's a little bit of a give and take there.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think if you're just having a conversation, and it's naturally flowing between someone, I wouldn't feel strange about just having these natural questions coming up. But if I was just intentionally sitting down and wanting to challenge someone, I think asking ahead of time if the topic isn't even being brought up, But if you're just having a natural conversation and it's flowing, sure. But if you're going to start asking even deeper questions, and you're going to start be like, maybe just ask if it's okay.
Yeah, I think that's right.
If they're comfortable with it, like, are you okay with this conversation going where it's going?
One of the challenges we see in SE, we get this a lot. Like, how do I use this approach with family and friends? I've seen people do it with strangers, and it's this interviewee type of thing. But when I try to use it with my parents or my spouse, it gets really awkward. And yes, you could invite them to do it, or you can say, I saw this thing, and can I try it on one of your beliefs? And you can choose a really safe one. It doesn't have to be the very sensitive one, by the way.
Yeah.
Or you can just wait. You can wait until they make a comment like, hey, the church is doing this. That doesn't really make sense to me. What do you think? And now they've opened the door to a dialogue, and then you're in, and you can go. But I wouldn't just keep asking question after question after question, like you might see in an interview style on YouTube or something.
Right.
You might only have the luxury of asking one or two, and then just back off, and then wait for them to organically bring it up again.
Because when you're getting questions fired at you, it's, with someone it's.
I have a video on my channel where a guy comes up to me. There's 3 videos with him, and he discovered my SE videos, and he realized, and he was taking anthropology at the local university. He's like post-military. I was going back to school. Okay. And then he discovered that his wife was he knew that his wife was homeschooling the kids, but she was teaching them that the earth was 6,000 years old, and she had all this homeschooling material. He's like, what is this? And he shifted into SE mode, and she got really upset with him.
Yeah.
Like, you're trying to manipulate me. Why are you doing this? I know what you're doing. And it was kind of an awkward moment to have somebody come up to me and say, I followed what you were doing in your videos, and it didn't go so well. And it's like, some adjustment's going to need to be made in those situations.
Yeah, no. My husband is he went to school for journalism and he was a reporter at times. And there's times where he'll fire just random questions at me about like, where are you going? What are you doing? Like da 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 da. And I'm just like, can you turn off like reporter Brian for a moment? Like, and that's just like random things about my day. So yeah, nobody likes having questions just fired at them at like just
especially if they're not expecting it, and especially if it's a sensitive topic like what we're teaching our kids. Because probably the wife felt blindsided and attacked,
blindsided,
and embarrassed, maybe.
Oh, for sure.
A whole range of emotions. I'm sure.
Embarrassment would definitely be high up there. I can imagine. I have a question. There's a couple here that are starred. One from Ascalon. Question for Anthony. Did you often follow up with other people you spoke to, which we kind of touched on that with them following up with you, but this is specific to Objectively Dan, beyond episodes of SE. So I know that's always people wanting to know about the follow-up with Objectively Dan, because I mean that's pretty darn cool.
That was pretty cool. So the follow-up with Objectively Dan didn't happen until he decided to reach out to me and say, I met with you a year ago. I can't remember the exact email. It's in the video that I put, but you got me thinking, and now I don't believe it anymore. It was kind of like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly the kind of feedback we want to get. So I messaged him back, and I ended up meeting with him again. And I made the poor guy stand out in the sun, and it was, I had all sorts of great questions for him. It's really kind of a great follow-up video, but those are a little bit few and far between. They're later in my years of going out and doing SE, I started incorporating this idea where I'd give people a choice of puzzle pieces. Do you ever see that? It's a gear-shaped squish. There's 3 pieces. I don't have one handy.
Okay. I feel like maybe I have.
3 pieces here. Yeah. I don't have one handy, but basically it's a gear puzzle piece, and I ask them, take one of these 3 pieces as a gift and then come back. So I was incentivizing people to come back because I wanted to see the progression. And I'd say I probably have a dozen to 20 people maybe that would come back for multiple conversations and build out the set. But that, do you want me to talk specifically about Dan or just in general about, about Dan?
Because maybe some people don't know that story. I
don't actually know the story. I've seen the
video.
You don't? Yeah. I don't know that was Objectively Dan.
Objectively Dan happened to be, he's the host of Truth Wanted, and then he sometimes co-hosts on AXP, Atheist Experience, I think. Just a great guy. He lives in Austin now. He's getting married, by the way.
I saw.
And I was just out there with my camera one afternoon, and him and one of his buddies were walking by. It turned out that they were part of Cru, the Campus Crusade for Christ. It's a on-campus Christian ministry. So
I've heard of it.
And they're out there to flag down. They weren't out there at the moment, I think, working for Cru, but they worked for Cru, and I had a good conversation. And it's a little tougher when you talk to 2 people, but Dan seemed to be really open and reflective to the questions I was asking, and inquisitive. He wanted to know what it meant to be an atheist. And these aren't questions I usually get from people. So he was unique in that regard to begin with. And then he had another fellow with him, maybe who was a little bit more reserved and a little bit more closed-minded, shall we say. And interviewed both of them. And then I hadn't heard from Dan for, like I said, about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And then he emailed me out of the blue, messaged me. And then we did the follow-up interview. And then we went out to lunch after that follow-up interview, by the way. Took him out to lunch, and he was just so, from what I remember, he was like so grateful and enthusiastic about getting into activism because he wanted to help other people who were stuck in that.
Oh, that's so nice.
So that really stuck with me, Yeah. He's a good guy.
Yeah. He's super nice. We've had him on.
He was going to come through San Antonio a couple weeks ago, but I had something going on. I couldn't meet with him, but we'll try to meet up again.
Yeah, that's awesome. We had him and Aaron on last spring, I think, on the show.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because he co-hosts with my sister-in-law on Truth Wanted. So, yeah, super cool.
He likes to say he's one of those rare people who has video showing that he was really a true believer. Because usually when you leave religion, how many times? Well, you weren't really a believer,
Right?
so,
I've lots of really cringy preaching videos, and oh boy, they hurt me when I watch them. They hurt me.
I see them on TikTok. There's this one girl. She's like stalks the stage, and she's like using kind of a hip hop voice. I don't know if you've seen her, and she's just a preacher. And I'm just thinking, you know, in 2 or 3 years, she's going to probably look back on this and just wonder what the hell is she doing.
Oh man,
it's the worst. It's the worst.
What is this? Well, he was obviously a plant.
Yeah. I was worried about getting accused of that.
Oh,
So if you notice on my videos, I usually record the whole thing from a few minutes, sometimes even 30 seconds. Yeah. Like I'll be standing out there like in the case of Dan, I think I even included, like, I asked somebody and they said no, and then maybe another person said no, and then finally Dan and this other guy said yes.
Okay.
It just kind of showed like these really were like, you know, legit conversations that not organically. They're definitely not organic because I'm like trying to make them happen.
Right. You're like, hey, come talk to me.
But they're legit.
Yep. Wow. Like I said, I always, when I watch, I think back, like, what would Christian Stacy have said or thought? And I know they would have broken down so many like thoughts in my brain, and I would have walked away and been like, oh my gosh, like what just happened? So
this is why I love recording them.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many my videos don't get a lot of views, unfortunately. It's a crime that not just mine, but SE videos in general hardly get any views. And it's really criminal because you get to watch people reflecting on their reasoning, likely the reasoning that you yourself have for other beliefs, maybe not necessarily the one that's even being explored. And it could profoundly improve how you reason about things.
Yeah.
And it's just nice to have some videos of that. So even though like people, even though you may never run into somebody on the street asking you SE types of questions, sharing a video on your channel could reach a lot of people and get them into that mindset of thinking about things.
Just plant that seed, right? Hopefully it falls on good soil, to borrow a
religious
Jesus.
I mean, there's some good parables. Come on.
They can't hog all of them.
They can't, right? So here's another question. What's Anthony's views on political topics, and what have you used? And have you used SE on political beliefs? Seems you have, and wonder what advice or comments on political divisiveness and if we can use SE to improve it.
I have used SE on political topics.
Okay.
More so in my later years, probably the last 3 or 4 years that I was doing SE, I was transitioning more from supernatural claims like gods and karma and ghosts and that type of thing, aliens. Aliens was probably like the dovetailing into like, okay, grounded beliefs that. So there's a great video on my channel with a guy. He just comes up to me. He didn't like me out there. I was on the trail, and he just all of a sudden wanted to talk about the legalization of marijuana. I think he thought I was out there smoking or selling. I don't know. And he was just in my face, and I was able to ask him a couple of questions that I think exposed, maybe not necessarily to him because he was so dogmatic and closed-minded, but revealed a lot of the faultiness with his reasoning and his closed-mindedness to the audience. And then I ended up releasing it on TikTok, and it got 20 times the number of views. So you can use it for political claims. In fact, I just made a tweet today. There's this argument going back and forth right now on Twitter between Christopher Rufo and Mark Cuban about DEI and what it means, and is it illegal and all this stuff. And of course, it's just, you know, Christopher Rufo says something and Mark Cuban just ignores it or shuts it down, or it's, you know, there's this back and forth, and it's going exactly as you would expect. They're not making any progress.
Okay.
And I retweeted one of the tweets associated with that thread saying, notice how they're each swatting down each other's reasoning and they're not making any progress. SE can help here.
Right.
And I would love to sit those two people down into a room and facilitate a conversation with them. And I have a colleague who's awesome at mapping it out, like on a Miro board where you can talk about people's reasoning and really get people thinking about how they're thinking, as opposed to reacting to evidence that the other side is presenting,
Right.
because you're not going to get anywhere. And
I,
my gosh, if we can secure those two people in a room and illustrate the tools of SE, that's the breakthrough. That would be one of the breakthroughs that we would probably need to like really move this into the culture.
Right.
My level of confidence that that's going to happen is like 4%.
Yeah.
But
engaging in like street epistemology style conversations has really made me aware of certain I guess defensive techniques people use to protect their beliefs, and one of them I find happens a lot with people who are very conspiratorially minded is, let's say I go into a conversation with someone who is telling me I know vaccines cause autism or something. I don't know, the earth is flat or the government's trying to kill us. And I just want to know if the government's trying to kill us, right? So I'm going to like ask questions to try and get to the root of that, to understand it. But what I find is, no, I will say 100% of the time that I've engaged with people, they will pivot. So like you'll be on one subject and you'll be going down the road of like trying to get to the conclusion, and they'll go, yeah, but and then this, and you go, whoa, let's bring it back. Like we don't need to pivot to something else. Like, let's bring it back to this one thing. And I find that a lot of people's beliefs aren't actually like individual things. They're part of this like web of identity markers. So like if you like see like some like left-wing like dreadlocked like hippie, you can make assumptions about like their political views, their like eating habits, their like all these things, because they're part of this like web of beliefs. And I find that that people, when engaging with these types of conversations, people will protect their beliefs in certain ways. And for conspiratorial ideas, they seem to pivot. Do you notice anything else, like any other ways that people protect their ideas when it is associated with their identity?
oh wow, that's a great question. Well, that's the first thing that usually comes to mind is people will pivot. You're talking about the moon landing with somebody, and you're just about to explore like what makes you think that didn't happen. And then suddenly you're on 9/11 and the melting point of steel, and they're hopping around. Sometimes you'll get what we were talking about earlier, where people will say, and this is probably more so for the God beliefs, like, well, I would hurt other people or myself if I didn't think that it was true. They tend to really ratchet it up and maybe scare you off from proceeding.
Right.
That could happen. Although you have to be careful there. Like they may really believe it. So sometimes I get the impression that people will say things to scare you off from exploring their reasoning further. And it doesn't mean that you should just shut it down, but you should explore. I think you should shift gears and explore why they think that that's the case.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that people do. What more might be there? That's such a good question. I don't know. I'm trying to think now, just from my own experience. Usually what I think I notice is that people just get a little, maybe just get a little confused or act as if they're confused. Like, and maybe they legitimately are. Like they're not maybe used to going to the deeper levels, and maybe they're uncomfortable going there. Oh, there's this one talk I remember. I wish I remember. I think the guy's name is Ian. So if you Google my name and Ian, I stopped two guys. They're walking by. It was almost kind of like a Dan and Bo situation, but they're two different people. And we were exploring his reasoning. And just as we were I think I asked an epistemological question, like almost like the outsider test, like we were talking about. You know, if somebody else had the same reasoning, what would you think about it? It's like 30 minutes, like 30 seconds of thinking. And he's like, oh, sorry, I got to go. I forgot I've got this meeting. And he like stopped the interview and just ended it and walked away. So that could be another thing too. They just, maybe they would just shut down.
Like avoidance.
It doesn't, I don't normally see that though. Like when you do this type of approach with SE, you don't tend to get those reactions.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a good question for me and David. Imagine yourself at the height of your belief. Anthony approaches you in the street. What do you say?
Would you even have the conversation? Would be my first question.
I would.
Yeah,
You would?
definitely.
100%.
Definitely.
And I'm not just
but
saying that.
why would you think that? Here's what I'm wondering though. What would motivate you to have a conversation about your deeply held belief with somebody who would be questioning it?
Because, oh, go ahead, David.
No, you go.
I would definitely have it because, oh, hi. It's funny when the camera changes. I'm like, oh, I would definitely have it because I still would want to know what I believe is true. And I also would, I was like, oh no, like I know it's true. So, and I also would have thought like if I back down, then I would be having doubt and that wouldn't have pleased God. So
You feel obligated to talk about it. And
yeah.
did you say like you knew it? Would you feel
Yeah.
confident in your ability to have the talk because you knew that it was true? Was that part of it? Because that's my suspicion.
Yeah.
I think people are so confident that they know that it's true that they don't have any hesitation to explore it with people.
Yeah.
I would have definitely felt like I would have felt confident in my belief. I don't know if I would have felt confident in providing you the answers. If that makes sense. Like
Verbalizing it.
Yes, verbalizing the answers. I would have just been like, I just know.
You know, I got that
me
same
thinking.
response. So before I get to you, David,
Yeah.
I remember getting the similar response when I was talking to the 2 Mormon missionaries, and one of them was reluctant to do the interview because they were afraid of giving a wrong answer, even though I think that they were highly confident that it was true. They were worried about not being able to properly represent it. And that's that is something that I do notice with people.
Yeah.
They don't want to let down their God. They don't want to let down their church, their pastor, their family.
Yeah. And my other thing would have been like, well, I know it's true and I have faith, and that's what I would have just relied on. And because my husband used to always be like, I wish I could believe like you believe. If God could just show me any evidence, then that would be great. I'd love to see it. And I would be like, well, it's just faith. It comes down to faith. You need to just have faith, which is such a typical Christian response, right? So, but if you would have asked me questions and probed, I definitely would have walked away and been like, oh my goodness, what just happened? Like, I know that for sure, because that's one thing about me is I have always been someone who is open to learning, open to correction. And if I'm wrong about something, I would like to know. So
even that deeply held belief.
Yeah. It would have been scary for sure. But I mean, look where I am now. So yeah, but I think it also would have had to be the right timing too, I think, because I know that my aunt tells this story that my uncle tried to tell me certain things about the Bible because he was no longer a Christian. He was an agnostic atheist, and he tried to bring things up and tell me things. And I got kind of panicky thinking, if I hear this, I'm going to be sinning. And she kind of said to him, no, she's not ready. So again, it would have to have been the right timing. And at that time I was like 21. So, yeah, so had to be timing. So anyways, that's a really long answer, but
that's great. I would have loved to have, like, I've always tried to push conversations into deeper territory, and it pisses everyone off. So if someone was wanting to have a deep conversation with me, even about my beliefs, I would have been really stoked. But I was so confident in my beliefs that I would have thought that the conversation would go in a route that I would examine my beliefs, but by the end you'd be amazed at my, I guess, my reasoning or something. Like, you'd be like, wow, that totally works. Or, wow, maybe I should go check out the church. And if things, and at the end, if things didn't go too well, I would have resorted to my fallback, which is what I used to do if I come up against, like, I had a teacher argue with me about science, and they were a science teacher, and they were arguing with me about like fossils at certain levels and stuff. And I just eventually resorted to, well, how do you explain all the miracles I see at church? Essentially, like these miracles I see, how do you explain them? and I would have ended on that, and then I would have maybe thought that you were demon possessed, or someone would have told me that, and I would have been like, maybe, or maybe you're oppressed, or maybe they're doing the work of the devil or something. But yeah, that's how it would have gone, I imagine.
That's awesome. But interesting differences there.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm trying to think how I would have responded. Like, I mean, of course, like, I didn't believe for the longest time, but as a kid, I think I would have really appreciated somebody asking me questions about that. But it wasn't allowed. It was shot down. I wasn't even offered that chance.
Yeah. Oh, crazy. Well, I feel like we almost got that opportunity. And like, what would you do if he came up to you? So, yeah. What is like one of the most common beliefs that you run into when you're asking people? Is it mostly religious?
I think it's regional. So if I was doing
okay.
SE in Texas and I was asking people to surface, I usually ask people, it's been years since I've done this, but I might go out and start doing it again. I don't know. But I usually ask people to pick a deeply held belief that they think is true, and they act out on it because they think that it's true. That's usually my preference, because it's kind of boring to SE a claim about a personal opinion that they like vanilla ice cream more so than chocolate, or that exercise is good for you. It doesn't make for a good video, and it just makes for a really boring SE conversation. So that's sort of my preface. But in Texas, I usually get religious claims, or karma comes up a lot, the law of attraction, a lot of supernatural, magical thinking comes up in my area. And I didn't usually get a lot of horoscope stuff, but if I would go to Oregon or California to do this, a lot of law of attraction and horoscopes.
Interesting.
Zodiac signs.
Right.
On the East Coast, my guess would be probably a lot of vaccine hesitancy and conspiratorial thinking and that type of thing, possibly.
Really?
So I think there's some regionality to it. In fact, I remember I was invited to give a talk in Oslo, Norway, and I had a little downtime, and the people that I was with, I said, I'd like to go out on the street and do some SE with people. And they said, well, it will be boring because everyone here is very logical and rational. And I tell you, I did 5 conversations. We didn't record them, unfortunately. And 4 of them were like law of attraction, karma, that there's a life after death, reincarnation, and of course, faith came up as a method for evaluating the quality of reasoning. So even though the claim will change depending on where you go, region, like whatever your location is, there's faultiness with how we're reasoning to our conclusions across the board. Doesn't matter if you're in a secular, logical, rational country like Norway or something like that, or if you're in Alabama in the United States, you're still going to detect faults in their reasoning and in yours. And SE is good for exposing that and helping people recognize it, and then affording them the opportunity to decide what they want to do with it.
Yeah.
Should I adjust my confidence? Should I reconsider? Do I need to talk to my priest now?
Yeah, for sure. I also wanted to ask you, just kind of pivot to recovering from religion, because you're involved with that, correct?
How did you know?
Because I talked to you at recovering
We
from
talked
religion.
about this?
No.
Did I interview you?
Yes, you did.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, yeah. I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
And I also know, I just know. I know all the things. I'm
You
really
know all
good.
the things. I've been volunteering for Recovering from Religion, which is a great organization, for 7 or 8 years now. I started off as a helpline agent where I would take phone calls, and that was challenging. The very first call I received was from somebody who was suicidal, and that's the limit. They transfer people over. And then calls after that, I remember getting a call from a 75-year-old who was he was very similar to you, David. Like, he was a very hardcore believer, but then he left the religion. But he also had a lot of guilt with bringing people to these views, and people are really hurting from these beliefs. And that's what I love about helping RFR. And so I've shifted, though. Like, it got to the point where I just couldn't. It was tough to get a call from 2 girls who were in an apartment because they left a cult and they didn't know where to go next, and this type of stuff. So it's tough to be on that side of it. So it's like, you know what? I think I'm going to just, I still want to help out this organization. So now I interview the helpline and support group volunteers
Yeah.
and vet them on behalf of RFR. There's just a list of questions that I ask, and I did 4 of them yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it wipes you out. But I like doing that. It's, you know, it's good because like we talked about how the effectiveness of SE with these religious beliefs. And if people are watching videos or they encounter somebody using SE and they start to question, it could be a painful process. And I love the fact that RFR is on the flip side of that to catch people who are struggling with those doubts, with those questions. So it's a great organization.
It is really great organization. I applied to be a helpline agent. You did my interview. You gave me the go ahead. But I got really busy with just doing, I have 3 kids and I do a lot of this and I work. So it's still, I'm hopefully when I have some time, I can go through the training still and maybe I have to go through the process again. But
I'm not sure what their rules are on that. I do know that they have a very flexible schedule, unless that's changed, where if you only have an hour a week or something, you hop in after the training, of course. You can take a phone call or you can chat with people or you can host a group in your area.
Right.
They do great work. And you know what's interesting? I'd say like 15% of the people that I interview are people that have reached out to RFR.
Oh, wow.
And received help. And then they want to give back.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I did not know about RFR until after I was out and then became a part of this community. So I really promote it now because it would have been an amazing resource during my deconversion. So I just want everyone to know about it. And I think Dr. Daryl Ray and, Glenda and Gail, thank you. I was like, I know 2 G's, Glenda and Gail Jordan are just fantastic. So, and Helen and everyone. So, that's so wonderful that you are doing something with them still. So we love recovering from religion.
Great org.
Yeah, definitely. So just before we begin to wrap up, could you tell us a little bit about the class? Skeptic. We didn't realize it was free. Yeah, the Navigating Beliefs. Didn't realize it was free. So going to sign up. What is the level of difficulty and time required for that course?
So if you go to navigatingbeliefs.com and you click one of the buttons, it takes you to a landing page and we give you an estimate about the amount of time that it takes to do the first 6 modules. I think it's like 2.5, 3 hours. You can take the first half of it. It's self-paced, so you can go at your own speed. You can do it on a mobile device or your desktop. And then you get a certificate of completion. I was going to say something else about it. There's knowledge checks in there if you want to check your knowledge, but you don't have to do that. Okay. And it's just a really good thing. And it's also laddered. We brought in an instructional designer and an editor. Like we've really put a lot of time and effort into it. So it builds on itself. So you'll notice that it will get progressively more challenging as you move through the modules, I think. But it's not like it's difficult or hard. We wrote it for a high school level education. And we try to make it really accessible and easy to understand. Sometimes at the expense of brevity. We did testing too. So we tested this both with people familiar with street epistemology and people not. And we would have liked to have had more people unfamiliar with SE help us test it, but that was just hard to find. Right. But we really listened to the feedback and ended up revising it quite a bit. That's why it took 3 years to do the first half. But now that we've refined our process, we now have AIs to help us. And we're hoping to get the second half of it done before the end of this year. But you can sign up for it now. It's free. And it's amazing. It will change the way that you talk to people about difficult topics for the better, for the rest of your life. Yeah, that's amazing. And I love talking about it. It's a foundational document that we plan on building offshoots. So actually, as we were testing one of our newest modules, module 7, which isn't out yet, 2 people showed up that have expertise in the legal field, the U.S. legal system. And we've always wanted to develop offshoot products from the Navigating Beliefs foundational course that are specific to different demographics: teachers,
Yeah.
journalists,
Wow.
science communicators. And it dawned, well, hey, we've got a couple people. So I've got a meeting later this week to see if we can develop a specific variation for attorneys. Because think about it, if you're on a jury, wouldn't you
Yeah.
want your jury to be made up of people who value evidence and think that
Yes.
truth is objective?
Yes.
But these aren't questions that we're asking the jury pool. So there could be some huge benefits to coming up with these variations. Hi, my wife's home from work.
Oh, hi. That is incredible. I can't believe it's free, to be honest.
Well,
'Cause-
yeah, that part's free, but we're going to charge. We have
Yeah.
to cover our expenses
Of
somehow.
course. Yeah.
We get donations,
Mhm.
but we'll charge for. We're launching a coaching and training offering where people can become a certified trainer eventually
Okay.
and teach this. And then Street Epistemology International, which is the organization that we started to legitimize and research and propagate SE around the world. We'll develop a certification program where you could actually get paid to teach people these tools.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, the course is free right now.
Okay. Okay. I'm signing up.
So good.
Awesome.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely going to
Awesome.
sign up because I think it's a great tool to have in your tool belt. And just, I like to learn, and it's especially talking to, like doing this, you're talking to theists and more, but with any type of, like you said, any type of deeply held belief, it's just good. And just to help you evaluate why you believe even things you still believe, right? So
Yeah, you could learn SE and never use it with anybody, and it will
Yeah.
fundamentally change how you reason about your conclusions for the
Yeah.
better.
yeah.
It'll make you a better rational thinker.
Yeah, well, that's important right then and there. And I'm also thinking now, like even just teaching stuff you learn from this. I have 3 small children, so teaching them these tools as well, because
For sure. Oh, that's
Yeah.
another offshoot that I'd love to see is
yeah,
revising these tools so that they're understandable for kids. I gave a
Mhm.
talk a week ago to a group called Philosophy for Children. It was
okay.
with Plato's Academy, and you had to sign up in order to get the video.
Mhm.
But I developed a curriculum that incorporated a lot of the concepts of SE.
Oh wow.
For teachers. There were 300 to 500 teachers at this thing. I did it over Zoom to teach teachers how to teach their students the types of faulty reasoning that we discover when you're involved in an SE conversation.
Mm.
So usually we discover these problems as we're using SE,
Mhm.
but we want to put them on the front end and give teachers the tools to teach their students to avoid these things before the beliefs are even formed,
That's
so
a
that
good
they can become
idea.
more careful reasoners at the outset. Because right now we're coming in after the fact and
And yeah,
harder
try
anyway.
exactly. Like later on in life, you're trying to like deal with this, but if you learn it at an early age, yeah, that would be so important.
I think
So,
it's awesome that you would even consider teaching your kids that, and it could be done in a respectful way.
yeah, definitely. Do you have any tips for teaching kids? Just wondering, like off the top of my head right now, like
Like I mean, encourage questioning would be one
Yeah.
thing. If they're worried that there's a monster
Sure.
under the bed, you explore their reasoning with them. It's probably
Yeah.
something you tend to do anyways with
Yeah,
them, for the most
yeah,
part. Would
definitely.
be one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After I deconverted, I basically like told them, because when I was a Christian, I was very black and white. I was very like, this is good, this is bad. And like that's the in group, that's the out group. And so when I deconverted, I sat the older 2 down because the younger one was only like 2. So he was never really a Christian. We can definitely say that one. But the older 2 had gone to Christian private school and stuff, so they had more exposure. But I told them, I said, just want to let you know, Mommy was wrong about a lot of things, and I'm really sorry about teaching those to you. And if you start learning things that maybe I don't know, feel free to come and teach those to me, because I don't know everything like I once thought I did. And I've taught you some things that were not correct, and I apologize. And we had a really great discussion. And so I said, you're gonna learn things that I don't know, and it's okay to come and tell me, and I want you to know that there's like open dialogue. And I said all the times that I said like this church was right and those churches were wrong, like I wasn't right about that, because now I don't believe in any of them. So
Wow.
Wow.
Do you talk
Yeah.
about that somewhere else? Because I'd love to hear what their reaction was and all that stuff.
I've just talked about it in little clips like this right now. I haven't done a full thing, but I should. But
Hmm.
yeah, I'd like to talk to them. Like they were 9 and 7 at the time, and they're 12 and 9
How do they
now.
take it? Like, are they, oh, okay, no problem. They just sort of they roll with it, or
No, I asked my oldest kind of what he thought. Like it was a gradual thing. I didn't just like all like deconvert and then just like boom, lay it on them. It was after a few months of them just sort of like realizing, okay, we're not going to church anymore, and have them ask questions. I didn't want it to be like a huge upheaval for them. And so I asked my oldest, like, so do you believe what the Bible said is true? Like, I wanted to just see what he thought. And he's like, Mummy, no. He's like, I don't think there's no such thing as talking snakes. And so I was like, oh, okay, because I wasn't sure. And so I kind of just asked him what he thought. And that's sort of what prompted the conversation. And then that's when I was like, I kind of taught you a lot of things that I thought was right. And I'm really sorry because I was wrong. Those are stories as far as I'm concerned. And I taught them to you like they actually were true. So I'm sorry. So he's like, it's okay. So yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, this has been fantastic. This feels like it's been like a visit, not
I feel like you're really
You
easy
know?
to talk to.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I try to be.
You
Hey, you are too. You make it easy for me too. So
Yeah.
thanks for having me on your show. I wish you
Yeah.
the best success with it, and
Yeah.
I hope you reach a lot of people. Do you carve this up and put it on TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that?
Well,
We should.
we really should. What I do sometimes is I'll just cut clips from different episodes and put them on my social media. But we should start doing more clips for social media from Skeptic Haven. But
Do you have any final thoughts, Anthony, before we wrap up?
Oh,
it's an animation.
I mean, we covered the course. Final thoughts. I don't want to squander this opportunity. I'm optimistic with where SE is heading. I think we have a lot of challenges in our community, and we have some branding issues because a lot of people will use SE tools to expose faulty reasoning, and oftentimes the manner with which they go about doing it can be problematic and be a challenge to SE. So, and even before even recent developments, you could pull up an SE video and you can see one of your deeply held beliefs being challenged, and it can turn you off immediately to learning more about the method. And it's a real shame because it's such a great tool for exploring our reasoning for all the conclusions that we have. So maybe just for your audience, if this is something that you're interested in, keep that in mind. And if you decide to share it with other people, keep that in mind too. You might here's my advice: anticipate concerning reactions to when they see SE videos and be prepared for it, but try to help them see the larger picture, that it actually is a great tool for getting down to the bottom of people's reasoning and helping them align their confidence to the quality of the evidence that they think that they have. Definitely. And that is a good thing for society. And I don't know if I could really say more than that, but I appreciate you having me on. And it's obvious that you both really care about what you're doing, and thanks to your crew too behind the scenes, making all this happen too.
Yeah.
They're awesome.
This was, like I said, this was wonderful and
this has been great. We just have a quick last announcement, and this Saturday at 3:30 Central, Women's Atheist Unload will be viewing Don't Worry, Darling, and discussing what does Jordan Peterson have to do with it all. That's going to be fun. Olivia Wilde and Harry Styles. You won't want to miss this. Next Sunday on Let's Talk, Sunny Shell and Neil, the 604 Atheist, will be hosting at 7 p.m. Central. Producer Wes.
Oh, that so I copy and pasted, and that included part of it.
Okay.
So.
And thank you to our patrons: Eric Ozols, Rion, Deneen Murphy, Dan D, Michael Wiseman, Cindy Plaza, Sunny Shell, Aaron Coalson, Phil Calderone, Amanda McLeod, and Logan Fisher. Thank you so much for supporting this channel.
Thank you so much. And David, where can we find you?
YouTube.com/at Deep Drinks. I have conversations with people over a drink of their choice, and the drink sets the tone for the interview. And Stacey, where can we find you?
At the Stacey's Mom podcast on Monday nights. So me and my mom have conversations with lots of people who are wonderful. So yes, awesome. You can find us there. And Anthony, your links are in the description below. So
thank you.
Yes, everyone go subscribe to all of our great content. And just want to also say thank you to everyone who is in the chat. We love when you are here and conversating with us. And just wanted to say good night, and we will see you all next time. And once again, thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.